Ethan Cole stood at the edge of what was once a bustling city. Now it was nothing more than ruins filled with broken buildings and empty streets. The wind carried the smell of rusted metal and old ash, a reminder of the battles that had torn this place apart. Ethan's hands rested on the railing of an old bridge, his fingers gripping tightly as if trying to hold on to something solid in a world that felt like it was falling apart. Behind him, Clara Bennett approached quietly. Her boots clicked softly against the cracked pavement, but Ethan didn't turn around. He knew it was her. Over the past few months, he'd grown used to her presence. She always seemed to show up when he needed someone to talk to, or when she wanted to remind him of his responsibilities. Today, Ethan guessed it was the latter. "You've been out here for over an hour," Clara said, her voice calm but firm. "People are waiting." Ethan sighed and finally turned to face her. His dark hair was messy, pushed back by the wind, and his tired eyes reflected the weight of everything he'd seen. "I know," he replied. "I just needed a moment." Clara crossed her arms and leaned against the railing beside him. She was shorter than Ethan, with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. But there was also kindness in her gaze, even if she didn't let many people see it. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she said after a pause. "Thinking about every decision, second-guessing every move. You'll burn out before we even get started." "I'm not second-guessing," Ethan muttered, though they both knew it wasn't true. Ever since he'd been thrust into leadership, Ethan had struggled to accept the role. He wasn't a natural leader like some of the others were. He hadn't asked for this. In fact, he'd spent most of his life avoiding anything that required taking charge. Before all of this, he'd been an engineer, fixing machines and staying out of trouble. Now he was expected to lead an entire resistance movement. Clara gave him a sideways glance. "You don't have to be perfect, Ethan. No one expects that from you. What they need is someone who will stand up and say, 'This is what we're going to do.' That's it, just decide." Ethan looked away, staring at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, colors that should have been beautiful but instead felt ominous. "It's not that simple," he said quietly. "Every choice I make affects hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. If I mess up, you won't," Clara interrupted. "Because you're smart enough to listen to the people around you. You've got Daniel keeping us safe, Mia figuring out how to fight back, and me making sure none of you trip over yourselves." She smirked slightly, trying to lighten the mood. "See? You're not alone in this." Ethan managed a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks, Clara. I mean it." "Good," she said, straightening up. "Now come on. We've got work to do." Back at their makeshift headquarters, an old library that had somehow survived the destruction, Ethan found himself surrounded by faces he barely recognized. Survivors from different parts of the country had started arriving, drawn by rumors of a growing resistance. Some came seeking safety, others wanted revenge. Whatever their reasons, they all looked to Ethan for guidance. The library was dimly lit, its shelves still lined with dusty books that no one had time to read anymore. Tables had been set up in the main hall, covered with maps, blueprints, and scraps of paper scribbled with notes. A group of people huddled around one table, discussing supply routes, while others worked on repairing weapons or tending to the wounded. Ethan climbed onto a low platform near the center of the room, clearing his throat to get everyone's attention. It took a few moments, but eventually the chatter died down and all eyes turned to him. He felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his chest, but he forced himself to speak. "We've made progress," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at him. "We've secured food, shelter, and medical supplies for everyone here. And thanks to Mia's work, we've learned more about the Curators' technology. But this isn't enough. Not yet." He paused, scanning the crowd. There were men and women of all ages, some young enough to still look hopeful, others old enough to carry the scars of too many losses. They listened intently, their expressions a mix of determination and fear. "The Curators aren't slowing down," Ethan continued. "They're planning something big, Something that could wipe out whatever's left of us if we don't act first. We can't wait for them to come to us. We need to hit them where it hurts. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone shouted, "Where do we start?" Another voice added, "What's the plan?" Ethan held up a hand to quiet them. Mia has uncovered fragments of information from satellites orbiting Earth. These files suggest there's a way to disrupt the Curators' control over their machines. But to get the full picture, we need to retrieve additional data from locations they've taken over. Daniel Harper stepped forward, his broad frame casting a shadow over the table. He was a grizzled man in his late 40s with a permanent scowl etched onto his face. "You're talking about suicide missions," he said bluntly. "Those places are crawling with their drones. Sending teams in there is asking for trouble. I know the risks," Ethan replied evenly. "But we don't have a choice. If we want to win this war, we have to take chances." "And what if we fail?" Daniel shot back. "What then? What happens to these people?" Before Ethan could answer, Clara stepped in. "If we fail, we try again," she said firmly. "That's what resistance means. We adapt, we survive, and we keep fighting." Her words seemed to resonate with the crowd. Slowly, heads began to nod, and murmurs of agreement spread throughout the room. Even Daniel's scowl softened, though he still looked unconvinced. Ethan took a deep breath. "We leave at dawn tomorrow. Volunteers only. This isn't going to be easy, but together, we can make it happen." As the meeting broke up, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and dread. He'd given the order, but now the responsibility weighed heavier than ever. Would they succeed? Or would this mission end in disaster, just like so many others before it? Later, that night, as Ethan sat alone in a corner of the library, Mia Torres joined him. She was younger than most of the others, with curly brown hair and glasses perched on her nose. Despite her quiet demeanor, she was fiercely intelligent, and Ethan trusted her judgment completely. "How are you holding up?" she asked, sitting down beside him. Ethan shrugged. "I've been better." Mia smiled faintly. "You're doing fine. Better than fine, actually. People believe in you, Ethan, even if you don't always believe in yourself." He glanced at her, surprised by her words. "Why do you think that?" "Because you care," she said simply. "You don't just see numbers or strategies, you see people. And that makes all the difference." For the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he wasn't ready to lead. Maybe he never would be. But as long as he kept trying, maybe that was enough. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins, carrying whispers of uncertainty and resolve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Ethan allowed himself a moment of peace. Together, they would rise, not just to fight but to reclaim what had been lost. The morning sun filtered through the cracks in the library's ceiling, casting long shadows across the room. Ethan Cole stood near the entrance, watching as volunteers prepared for the mission. Backpacks were packed with supplies, weapons were checked and rechecked, and maps were spread out on a table for one last briefing. Despite the early hour, there was a buzz of energy in the air, a mix of determination and nervousness. Clara Bennett walked over to him, her usual calm demeanor, masking the tension she felt. "Ready?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "As ready as I'll ever be," Ethan replied, forcing a smile. He adjusted the strap of his rifle and glanced at the team gathering around them. Daniel Harper stood nearby, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. Mia Torres was busy double-checking the equipment, her glasses slipping down her nose as she worked. A few other volunteers lingered, some chatting quietly, others lost in thought. Clara gave him a reassuring nod. "You've got this. Just stick to the plan." Ethan nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong. Plans always seemed solid until reality hit, and this mission was no exception. They were heading into enemy territory, an old skyscraper now overrun by the Curators' biomechanical constructs. It was a dangerous gamble, but they had no choice. If they wanted to find the missing data core, they had to take the risk. The journey to the skyscraper was tense. The group moved quickly and quietly, sticking to the shadows of crumbling buildings and abandoned streets. The city was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of rusted metal or the distant hum of the Curators' drones. Every sound made Ethan's heart race, and he found himself glancing over his shoulder more often than he should. As they approached their destination, Mia pointed to a narrow alleyway. "We can use this to get closer," she whispered. "It leads to a service entrance at the back of the building," Daniel grunted. "And what if it's guarded?" "It's our best shot," Mia replied firmly. "If we try the main entrance, we'll be spotted for sure." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Let's move." They slipped into the alley, their footsteps muffled by debris and broken glass. The air smelled damp and metallic, and the walls seemed to close in around them. Ethan kept his hand on his weapon, ready for anything. When they reached the service entrance, Mia knelt down to examine the lock. "This might take a minute," she said, pulling a small toolkit from her bag. "Hurry up," Daniel muttered, scanning the area. "We don't have all day." Mia shot him a glare but didn't respond. Her fingers worked quickly, and within moments the door clicked open. She pushed it gently, peeking inside before motioning for the others to follow. The interior of the skyscraper was dark and cold, the only light coming from cracks in the walls and shattered windows. Dust hung in the air, making it hard to breathe, and the floor was littered with rubble. Ethan signaled for the group to split up, covering more ground while staying within shouting distance. They moved cautiously, checking each room for signs of the data core. Most were empty, stripped bare by scavengers or destroyed during earlier battles. But as they climbed higher into the building, they began to encounter resistance. Small groups of biomechanical constructs patrolled the halls, their glowing eyes scanning for intruders. Ethan held up a fist, signaling for the team to stop. Ahead, two of the machines stood guard outside a locked door. Their movements were jerky but precise, and Ethan could hear the faint whirring of gears beneath their metallic exteriors. "We need to take them out quietly," Clara whispered, crouching beside him. "If they alert the others, we're done." "4." Ethan nodded. "Daniel, you and Mia circle around and flank them. Clara and I will draw their attention." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" "No," Ethan admitted. "But it's the best chance we've got." Without waiting for further discussion, Ethan and Clara stepped into the hallway, deliberately making noise to attract the construct's attention. The machines turned toward them, their heads tilting slightly as if analyzing the threat. Behind them, Daniel and Mia crept into position, their weapons at the ready. When the constructs lunged forward, Ethan and Clara opened fire, their shots echoing loudly in the confined space. The machines staggered but didn't fall, their durable frames absorbing the impact. Just as one of them raised a clawed arm to strike, Daniel and Mia attacked from behind, delivering precise blows that disabled their targets. "Nice work," Ethan said, breathing heavily as he lowered his weapon. "Don't congratulate us yet," Daniel replied, nodding toward the locked door. "What's behind here?" Mia knelt down to examine the lock. "This is reinforced. We'll need explosives." Clara frowned. "Won't that bring every construct in the building down on us?" "It's a risk we'll have to take," Ethan said grimly. "Set the charges." Mia worked quickly, attaching small explosive devices to the doorframe. Once she was done, the group retreated to a safe distance. On Ethan's signal, Mia triggered the detonation. The explosion was deafening, sending chunks of concrete flying in all directions. Alarms blared immediately, and the sound of approaching constructs filled the air. "Move!" Ethan shouted, leading the team through the now open doorway. Inside, they found a large server room filled with blinking lights and humming machinery. Rows of servers lined the walls, connected by tangles of wires and cables. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested the data core they had come for. "There it is," Mia exclaimed, rushing forward. Before anyone could react, a massive biomechanical construct emerged from the shadows. It towered over them, its body covered in jagged armor and its limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Its glowing red eyes fixed on the group, and it let out a low, guttural growl. "Everyone, fall back," Ethan yelled, raising his weapon. The construct charged, moving faster than anything they had faced before. Ethan fired repeatedly, his shots ricocheting off its armored hide. Daniel and Clara joined in, their combined firepower barely slowing the creature down. Meanwhile, Mia grabbed the data core and stuffed it into her bag, knowing their escape depended on her success. "Got it!" she shouted, backing away from the pedestal. "We need to go now," Clara called, firing another round at the construct. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "Fall back to the exit, I'll cover you." "No way," Daniel snapped. "You're not staying behind." "I'll be right behind you," Ethan insisted. "Just go." Reluctantly, the others obeyed, retreating toward the stairs. Ethan stood his ground, firing steadily at the construct as it advanced. His heart pounded in his chest and sweat dripped down his face, but he refused to give up. Finally, when the others were out of sight, he turned and sprinted after them, the construct hot on his heels. They reached the ground floor just as the first wave of reinforcements arrived. Dozens of smaller constructs poured into the lobby, cutting off their escape route. Ethan skidded to a halt, his mind racing for a solution. "There!" Clara shouted, pointing to a collapsed section of the wall leading outside. "We can make it through there." Without hesitation, the group dashed toward the opening, leaping over debris and dodging attacks. The larger construct crashed through, the wall behind them, its roar shaking the ground. Ethan glanced back, seeing the creature mere steps away. "Jump!" Daniel barked, shoving Ethan forward. They tumbled through the gap, landing hard on the other side. The construct tried to follow but became stuck in the narrow opening, its thrashing causing part of the wall to collapse and seal the breach. For a moment the group lay there, catching their breath and listening to the distant sounds of destruction fading away. We did it," Mia gasped, clutching the data core tightly. Ethan sat up, wincing as pain shot through his leg. "For now," he said, his voice hoarse. "But this isn't over." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved us, Ethan. Don't forget that." He looked at her, then at the rest of the team. For the first time in days, he felt a spark of pride, not because of what he'd done, but because of what they had accomplished together. Despite the odds, they had succeeded. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger. As they limped away from the ruined skyscraper, the weight of their victory settled over them. The fight was far from finished, but they had taken a crucial step forward. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. The group returned to the library late in the evening, exhausted but triumphant. Ethan limped through the entrance, his leg throbbing from the injuries he'd sustained during the escape. Clara stayed close by his side, her hand resting lightly on his arm to steady him. Behind them, Daniel and Mia carried the data core carefully, its importance clear in their cautious movements. News of their success spread quickly among the survivors. People gathered in the main hall, their faces lighting up with hope as they watched the team enter. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of optimism in the air. Ethan felt it too, though it was tempered by the knowledge that their victory was only one small step in a much larger battle. Mia wasted no time getting to work. She set up in a corner of the library, surrounded by tools and pieces of salvaged technology. The data core sat on the table in front of her, its surface cracked and worn but still functional. As she connected it to her laptop, lines of code began scrolling across the screen. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, decoding fragments of information and piecing together the puzzle. Ethan sank into a chair nearby, wincing as he stretched his injured leg. Clara handed him a canteen of water and sat down beside him. "You did good," she said softly. "This changes everything." "Does it?" Ethan asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "We've got one piece of the puzzle. What if it's not enough? What if we can't figure out how to use it?" Clara gave him a sharp look. "Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Talking yourself out of feeling proud. We just pulled off something incredible. You led us through hell and back, and now we have a chance, a real chance, to fight back against the Curators. Don't ruin this moment by doubting yourself." Ethan opened his mouth to respond but closed it again. He knew Clara was right. but it was hard to shake the weight of responsibility. Every decision he made seemed to carry the lives of hundreds on his shoulders. Still, for now, he let himself feel a flicker of pride. They had done something important, and that mattered. By morning, Mia had made significant progress. She called Ethan, Clara, and Daniel to her makeshift workstation, excitement evident in her expression. "I think I've found something," she said, pointing to the screen. "This fragment mentions a network, the central nervous system of the Curators' machines. If we can disrupt it, even temporarily, we could disable large groups of their constructs." Daniel leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "That sounds too good to be true. How do we do it?" "It's not going to be easy," Mia admitted. "We'll need to build a device capable of emitting a specific frequency that interferes with their systems. But the good news is, this data gives us a blueprint for how to do it." Clara crossed her arms. "How long will it take?" "A few days, maybe more," Mia replied. "But we'll need help, lots of it. This isn't something I can do alone." Ethan nodded. "We'll organize teams to assist you. Whatever you need, you'll get it." As they discussed logistics, the mood in the library shifted. Survivors, who had been skeptical about Ethan's leadership before, now rallied around the idea of building the device. Hope was contagious, and it spread quickly. People volunteered to scavenge for materials, repair damaged equipment, or guard the perimeter, while Mia worked. But as the days passed, tensions began to rise. The sudden influx of newcomers brought challenges that no one had anticipated. Resources were stretched thin, and disagreements erupted over how best to manage the growing community. Some argued for strict military discipline, insisting that survival required order and control. Others pushed for a more democratic approach, believing that everyone should have a say in decisions. Ethan found himself caught in the middle, trying to balance competing demands. One evening, after a particularly heated debate, he retreated to the roof of the library to clear his head. The cool night air helped soothe his frustration, but it couldn't erase the doubts gnawing at him. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Clara said, joining him. She leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Feels like I am," Ethan replied. "Everyone wants something different. I don't know how to make them all happy." "You're not supposed to," Clara said bluntly. "Your job isn't to please everyone. It's to keep us alive and moving forward. Sometimes that means making tough decisions even if not everyone agrees." "I don't want to alienate people," Ethan muttered. "They're counting on me." "And they trust you," Clara reminded him. "Not because you're perfect, but because you care. That's what matters. So stop worrying about pleasing everyone and focus on what needs to be done." Ethan sighed, knowing she was right. Leadership wasn't about avoiding conflict, it was about navigating it. With renewed determination, he decided to address the issue directly. The next day, he called a meeting in the main hall. When the crowd gathered, Ethan climbed onto the platform and cleared his throat. "I know things have been tense lately," he began, his voice steady. "We're all tired and we're all scared, but we can't let fear divide us. We're stronger together and we need to act like it." He paused, letting his words sink in. "From now on, we'll form councils to handle different tasks: food distribution, security, repairs, and so on. Each council will have representatives from different groups so everyone has a voice. But final decisions will come from me and my team. That's how we'll stay organized and efficient." A murmur rippled through the room, but no one objected. Ethan continued, "We're building something here, not just a weapon but a future, and we need to govern ourselves wisely if we want it to last." When the meeting ended, Ethan felt a sense of relief. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Over the next few days, the councils took shape, and order began to emerge from chaos. Supplies were rationed fairly, patrols were coordinated effectively, and morale improved as people saw tangible results. Despite these successes, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. His instincts proved correct when Mia approached him one afternoon, her face pale with worry. "We have a problem," she said quietly, pulling him aside. "What is it?" Ethan asked, immediately alert. "One of our supply convoys was ambushed yesterday. Mia explained. They managed to escape, but someone tipped off the Curators. Someone here. Ethan's heart sank. Betrayal was the last thing they needed. Are you sure? Mia nodded. I reviewed the convoy's route. It didn't match any of the planned paths. Whoever leaked the information must have known exactly where they were going. Ethan clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Find out who it is, quickly. Mia hesitated. There's more. Whoever did this, they might not have acted alone. There could be others. The implications were chilling. If the Curators had infiltrated their ranks, then no one was safe. Ethan turned to Clara, who had overheard the conversation. We need to tighten security, he said firmly. No one leaves or enters without clearance, and we interrogate anyone who seems suspicious. Clara nodded. I'll handle it. As the investigation unfolded, paranoia spread through the community. Accusations flew and trust eroded. Ethan struggled to maintain order, reminding everyone that panic would only make things worse. Finally, after days of searching, Mia uncovered evidence pointing to Ryan Caldwell, a technician who had joined the resistance several weeks earlier. Ryan was brought before Ethan, his face pale and his hands trembling. I didn't have a choice, he stammered. They threatened my family. I had to do what they said. Ethan stared at him, torn between anger and pity. You put us all at risk, he said coldly. Do you understand that? I'm sorry, Ryan whispered, tears streaming down his face. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. Ethan looked away, struggling to contain his emotions. He wanted to lash out, to punish Ryan for his betrayal. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he turned to Clara. Lock him up, he said quietly. We'll decide what to do with him later. As Ryan was led away, Ethan felt the weight of leadership press down on him once again. Betrayal was painful, but it also reminded him of why he fought. For every person who doubted or betrayed them, there were dozens more who believed in the cause. And as long as those people stood together, there was still hope. The next day, Ethan addressed the community once more. Standing on the platform, he spoke with conviction. We've faced setbacks and we'll face more, but we won't let fear or betrayal break us. We're stronger than that. Together, we'll reclaim what's ours. The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the library. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. The road ahead was uncertain, but for now they were united, and that was enough. The days following Ryan Caldwell's betrayal were tense and unsettling. The atmosphere in the library felt heavier, as if the air itself carried the weight of suspicion. Ethan Cole moved through the space with a sense of unease, his eyes scanning the faces around him. Everyone seemed to be watching everyone else now, searching for signs of deceit or disloyalty. It wasn't just Ryan who had shaken their trust. It was the realization that anyone could be hiding secrets. Clara Bennett noticed Ethan's growing tension. She found him pacing near the entrance of the library, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. You're thinking too much, she said, stepping into his path. Stop it. Ethan stopped walking but didn't look at her. How can I not? Someone handed us over to the Curators. What if there are more like Ryan? What if they strike again? We'll deal with it, Clara replied firmly. But you can't let fear paralyze you. That's what they want, to make us turn on each other. I know, Ethan muttered. It's just hard. Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. We're all here for you. Trust us. Her words reminded Ethan of something Mia Torres had said earlier. Unity was their greatest strength. He took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, let's focus on what matters, finishing the device. Mia worked tirelessly, her small workspace, cluttered with wires, circuits, and half-finished prototypes. The data core had given her a blueprint for the weapon, but turning theory into reality was proving difficult. Every day brought new challenges. Parts were missing, designs needed adjustments, and power sources were unreliable. Still, she refused to give up. Daniel Harper often joined her, offering assistance despite his lack of technical expertise. "Need me to hold anything?" he asked one afternoon, standing awkwardly in the corner. Mia glanced up from her work. "Sure. Hand me that soldering iron." Daniel picked up the tool and handed it to her carefully. "You really think this thing will work?" "It has to," Mia replied without looking up. "If it doesn't, we're out of options." Daniel frowned but didn't press further. Instead, he watched silently as Mia pieced together the prototype. Her hands moved with precision, her focus unwavering. For someone so young, she carried herself with remarkable confidence. As the hours passed, others began to gather around Mia's workstation. Survivors brought food, water, and encouragement, their presence a reminder of how much depended on her success. Ethan arrived later, leaning against a nearby table as he observed her progress. "How's it going?" he asked quietly. Mia looked up briefly. "Slowly, but I'm close." Ethan nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." She smiled faintly. "I will." By the end of the week, the prototype was complete. It was a bulky device, roughly the size of a backpack, with blinking lights and exposed wiring. Though far from perfect, it represented hope, a tangible step toward reclaiming their world. Mia powered it on for the first time, holding her breath as the machine hummed to life. A low-frequency pulse emitted from its core, invisible but powerful enough to disrupt nearby electronics. When she tested it on a deactivated biomechanical construct scavenged from an earlier battle, the results were promising. The machine shuddered and collapsed, its systems overwhelmed by the interference. "It works," Mia whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It actually works." The news spread quickly, drawing cheers from those gathered around her. Even Daniel cracked a rare smile. "Guess we've got ourselves a weapon after all." Ethan approached Mia, his expression serious. "This is huge, but deploying it won't be easy. We'll need to coordinate carefully." Mia nodded. "I know, and we'll need more units if we want to make a real impact." "Then that's our next priority," Ethan said decisively. "We'll start production immediately." As plans for mass-producing the device took shape, tensions within the community resurfaced. Some argued that resources should be focused on defense rather than offense, while others insisted that attacking the Curators directly was the only way to ensure long-term survival. Ethan listened to both sides, weighing their arguments carefully. One evening during a council meeting, Daniel voiced his frustration loudly. "We're wasting time," he snapped, slamming his fist on the table. "Every day we sit here debating is another day the Curators grow stronger. We need to hit them now, hard." "And risk losing everything we've built?" countered Sarah Miller, a council member representing the medical team. "If we rush into this without proper preparation, we could lose hundreds of lives." Ethan raised a hand to silence them. "Both points are valid," he said evenly, "but we can't afford to delay indefinitely. Here's what we'll do. We'll prepare 2 teams, one to defend the library and another to strike at a key Curator stronghold. If we succeed, we'll cripple their operations and buy ourselves time to expand production of the device." The room fell silent as people considered his proposal. Finally, Clara spoke up. "It's risky, but it's our best shot. I'm in." Others followed suit, voicing their support. With the decision made, preparations began in earnest. Weapons were distributed, supplies were packed, and strategies were refined. Ethan assigned Daniel to lead the strike team, knowing his combat experience would be invaluable. Meanwhile, Clara stayed behind to oversee defenses, ensuring the library remained secure. On the morning of the mission, the strike team assembled outside the library. The mood was somber but determined. Ethan addressed the group, his voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at him. "This isn't just about winning a battle," he said. "It's about proving to ourselves, and to the Curators, that we're still here. That we won't back down." Daniel stepped forward, gripping his weapon tightly. "Let's finish this." With that, the team set off, disappearing into the ruins of the city. Their destination was a massive factory complex, repurposed by the Curators to produce biomechanical constructs. Intelligence suggested it was heavily guarded but also vulnerable to disruption. If they could destroy it, they'd deal a significant blow to their enemy's capabilities. The journey was fraught with danger. Patrols of biomechanical constructs roamed the streets, forcing the team to take circuitous routes and avoid detection. At one point, they narrowly escaped an ambush when a hidden sensor triggered an alarm. Ethan cursed under his breath as they ducked into an alleyway, waiting for the drones to pass. "You okay?" Clara whispered, noticing his clenched jaw. "I'm fine," Ethan replied tersely. "Just wish this was easier." "No one ever said it would be," Clara reminded him. "Keep moving." When they finally reached the factory, the sight was daunting. Towering walls surrounded the compound, topped with razor wire and patrolled by armed constructs. Spotlights swept across the perimeter, illuminating every inch of ground. "This is insane," Daniel muttered. "There's no way we can get in unnoticed." "We don't need to sneak in," Ethan said, pulling out the prototype device. "We'll create a distraction instead." Mia activated the machine, adjusting its frequency to match the signal used by the Curators network. Within moments, chaos erupted inside the compound. Constructs froze mid-movement, their systems overwhelmed by the interference. Alarms blared as the defenders scrambled to respond. "Now!" Ethan shouted, leading the charge toward the main gate. The team fought fiercely, taking advantage of the confusion to breach the perimeter. Once inside, they split into smaller groups, planting explosives at key locations throughout the facility. Explosions rocked the building as charges detonated, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the sky. Despite their initial success, resistance stiffened as reinforcements poured in. Ethan found himself pinned down behind a pile of rubble, exchanging fire with a group of constructs. His ammunition was running low and exhaustion clouded his vision. "Ethan," Clara called, throwing him a fresh magazine. "Fall back." He obeyed, retreating to regroup with the others. Together they fought their way to the exit, pursued relentlessly by their enemies. Just as they reached the outer wall, Daniel turned, to cover their escape, firing wildly to hold off the advancing constructs. "Go!" he yelled. "I'll catch up." Ethan hesitated, torn between leaving and staying to help. But before he could decide, a massive explosion tore through the factory, collapsing part of the structure and cutting off pursuit. The team sprinted away, adrenaline masking their fatigue until they were safely out of range. Back at the library, survivors greeted them with cheers and applause. The mission had been costly. Several members of the strike team hadn't returned, but the victory was undeniable. For the first time in months, the Curators had suffered a major defeat. Ethan stood before the crowd, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Today we showed them that we're not afraid, that we won't give up. This is just the beginning. Together we'll reclaim what's ours." Though the war was far from over, the tide had begun to turn. Hope burned brighter than ever, fueling their resolve to keep fighting, for justice, for freedom, and for the future they deserved. The victory at the factory was a turning point, but it came at a cost. Daniel Harper had stayed behind to cover the team's escape, and though they hoped he had survived the explosion, no one dared to believe it. Ethan Cole carried the weight of that loss heavily. Even as the survivors celebrated their success, he sat alone in a corner of the library, staring at the floor while the sounds of laughter and cheers echoed around him. Clara Bennett found him there, her expression softening when she saw how defeated he looked. "You did everything you could," she said, sitting beside him. "Don't punish yourself for something you couldn't control." Ethan shook his head. "I should have gone back for him. I shouldn't have left anyone behind." "You didn't leave him behind," Clara replied firmly. "He made a choice to protect the rest of us. You honor him by keeping the fight alive." Her words struck a chord, but they didn't ease the guilt gnawing at him. Ethan knew Daniel had sacrificed himself willingly, but that didn't make it easier to accept. Still, he forced himself to nod. "You're right. We can't stop now." In the days that followed, the community worked tirelessly to expand production of the prototype weapon. Mia Torres led the effort, teaching others how to assemble the devices using scavenged materials. The process was slow and labor-intensive, but morale remained high. Survivors took pride in contributing to the resistance, seeing each completed unit as a step toward reclaiming their world. Ethan divided his time between overseeing operations and addressing concerns within the community. Though tensions had eased since the council system was established, challenges remained. Supplies were still limited and disagreements occasionally flared over resource allocation. But Ethan handled these issues with patience, listening to everyone's input before making decisions. One evening, as Ethan reviewed maps of potential targets, Clara joined him. She placed a cup of tea on the table and sat down across from him. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better," Ethan admitted. "But I keep thinking about what's next. Every win feels like it's just buying us time." "That's all we can ask for," Clara said. "Time to rebuild, to grow stronger, and every victory weakens the Curators, don't forget that." Ethan nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. They had struck a blow against their enemy, but the Curators weren't going to give up easily. He knew another attack would come, sooner rather than later. That attack arrived unexpectedly, catching the resistance off guard. Early one morning, alarms blared throughout the library as scouts reported a large force of biomechanical constructs advancing toward their position. Panic spread quickly, but Ethan acted swiftly, rallying defenders to prepare for the assault. "We've trained for this," he told the group gathered in the main hall. "Stay calm, stay focused. We've got weapons, we've got numbers, and we've got something they don't: heart." Clara stood beside him, her voice steady as she added, "Protect the civilians. Get them to the lower levels if things go south. We'll hold the line here." As the first wave of constructs breached the perimeter, chaos erupted. Explosions rocked the building, and the sound of gunfire filled the air. Ethan moved through the fray, coordinating efforts and lending support where needed. Despite the overwhelming odds, the defenders held their ground, using the prototype weapons to devastating effect. Mia fought alongside the others, clutching one of the devices tightly. Her hands trembled as she aimed it at an approaching construct, triggering a pulse that sent the machine crashing to the ground. Relief washed over her as she realized the weapon worked exactly as intended. The battle raged for hours, testing the limits of endurance for everyone involved. Just when it seemed like the defenders might be overwhelmed, reinforcements arrived, an unexpected ally in the form of a neighboring survivor group led by a man named Lucas Grayson. Lucas and his people had heard about the Resistance's victories and decided to join the fight. Their arrival turned the tide, forcing the Curators' forces to retreat. When the dust settled, the library stood battered but intact, its defenders bloodied but triumphant. Ethan approached Lucas after the battle, extending a hand in gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. "We couldn't have done it without you." Lucas smiled faintly. "We're all fighting for the same thing. It's time we stopped doing it alone." With the immediate threat neutralized, Ethan called a meeting to discuss the implications of Lucas's arrival. The new alliance brought fresh resources and manpower, but it also raised questions about leadership and strategy. Some members of the community worried that integrating outsiders would dilute their unity, while others welcomed the opportunity to strengthen their cause. Ethan addressed these concerns during the meeting, standing before a crowd that now included both old and new faces. "Change is hard," he began, "but it's necessary if we want to survive. We can't afford to let fear divide us, not when we've come so far together." He paused, letting his words sink in. "From now on, we operate as one. That means sharing resources, combining strengths and trusting each other, because trust is what will keep us alive." The room erupted in applause, signaling approval of his vision. Clara caught Ethan's eye and gave him a small smile, proud of how far he'd come as a leader. Once hesitant and uncertain, he now commanded respect without demanding it, a testament to his growth. In the weeks that followed, the expanded community set to work fortifying their position and planning future operations. Production of the prototype weapons accelerated, thanks to the influx of materials and expertise from Lucas's group. Ethan worked closely with both factions to ensure cooperation, smoothing over conflicts whenever they arose. During this time, Ethan found solace in reflection. Late at night, when the library was quiet, he would sit by a window and stare at the stars. He thought about those who had been lost, Daniel, Ryan, and countless others, and wondered if their sacrifices would ultimately mean something. The answer wasn't clear, but he chose to believe it would. One night, Clara joined him at the window. "Thinking about them?" she asked softly. "All the time," Ethan admitted. "I just hope we're doing enough." "You are," Clara said, firmly, "and so are they. Everyone here is part of this fight, whether they're holding a weapon or keeping the lights on. Together we're reclaiming what matters." Her words resonated deeply, reminding Ethan why they continued to push forward despite the odds. Hope wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice. And every day they chose to keep fighting for a better tomorrow. As preparations for the next phase of the campaign progressed, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Curators still loomed large, their shadow cast over every decision and action. But for the first time, Ethan believed they could win, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they refused to give up. When the time came to launch their next offensive, Ethan stood before the assembled forces, his voice steady and resolute. "This isn't just about taking back what's ours," he said. "It's about proving, to ourselves and to them, that we're not afraid, that we won't stop until we've reclaimed everything they've taken from us." Cheers erupted, echoing through the library as the fighters prepared to march. Ethan watched them go, his heart swelling with pride. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but they were ready. Together they would rise, govern, and reclaim. The final offensive against the Curators began at dawn. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of their makeshift base, watching as teams of fighters prepared to move out. The air was crisp and cold, carrying with it the faint scent of ash and metal from the ruins around them. It was a quiet moment before the storm, a chance for Ethan to reflect on how far they had come. Months ago, he had been an ordinary man, unsure of himself and burdened by doubt. Now he led a united front of survivors determined to take back their world. Each face in the crowd reminded him of the sacrifices made along the way: Daniel Harper's courage, Ryan Caldwell's betrayal, and countless others whose names he would never know. Their stories fueled his resolve. Clara Bennett approached him, her expression calm but focused. "Ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The plan was ambitious but necessary. They would strike at multiple Curator strongholds simultaneously, using the prototype weapons to disable their biomechanical constructs. The goal wasn't just to weaken the Curators, it was to dismantle their control entirely. If successful, they could cripple their enemy's ability to fight back. The first wave of attacks went better than expected. Teams armed with the prototype, devices infiltrated key locations, targeting communication hubs and production facilities. The weapons proved devastatingly effective, disrupting the Curators' network and leaving their forces disoriented. Survivors cheered as news of each victory reached the main camp, boosting morale and fueling their momentum. But the Curators weren't defeated yet. As the resistance pressed deeper into hostile territory, they encountered fiercer resistance. Massive biomechanical constructs emerged, larger and more advanced than anything they had faced before. These machines were relentless, their glowing eyes scanning for targets and their armored bodies shrugging off most attacks. Ethan led one of the assault teams, coordinating efforts through a handheld radio. His voice remained steady despite the chaos erupting around him. "Stick to the plan," he instructed over the comms. "Focus fire on the big ones. They're the priority." Mia Torres fought alongside the team, clutching a prototype weapon tightly. Her hands trembled as she aimed it at a towering construct, triggering a pulse that sent the machine staggering. For a brief moment, hope surged within her, but then the construct recovered, its systems adapting to the interference. "They're learning," Mia shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "The frequency isn't working anymore," Ethan cursed, under his breath. "Fall back. Regroup." The team retreated hastily, narrowly avoiding being overwhelmed. Back at their rally point, Ethan gathered the fighters, frustration etched on his face. "We need a new approach," he said. "If the weapons aren't enough, we'll have to rely on strategy." Clara stepped forward, her sharp mind already working through possibilities. "What about hitting their central core? If we can find where they're controlling these machines, we might be able to shut them all down at once." Ethan hesitated. Attacking the central core would be dangerous, likely suicidal, but it was also their best chance. "Where is it?" he asked. Mia pulled out a map marking a location deep within enemy territory. "This is our best guess, but getting there won't be easy." "We don't have a choice," Ethan replied firmly. "Let's move." The journey to the central core was harrowing. The group moved cautiously, sticking to shadows and avoiding patrols of biomechanical constructs. Every step felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between survival and disaster. Tension hung thick in the air, and exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone. When they finally reached the outskirts of the facility, Ethan called a halt. The structure loomed ahead, its walls bristling with defenses and surrounded by swarms of drones. Spotlights swept across the perimeter, illuminating every inch of ground. "This is insane," one of the fighters muttered. "There's no way we can get in unnoticed." "We don't need stealth," Ethan said, gripping his weapon tightly. "We need speed." He turned to Mia. "Can you modify the frequency again?" "I'll try," she replied, adjusting the settings on her device. "But I can't promise it will work." "Do what you can," Ethan urged. "We're running out of time." As Mia worked, the others prepared for the assault. When she signaled that the weapon was ready, Ethan gave the order to advance. The team charged forward, firing wildly to draw attention away from Mia, as she planted charges at key points around the perimeter. Explosions rocked the compound, creating chaos and opening a path for the group to breach the walls. Inside, they found themselves surrounded by labyrinthine corridors filled with biomechanical constructs. The fight was brutal, pushing everyone to their limits. Ethan fought fiercely, his movements fueled by desperation and determination. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, a massive chamber dominated by a pulsating orb suspended in midair. The central core glowed with an eerie light, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Around it, biomechanical constructs stood guard, their red eyes fixed on the intruders. "This is it," Ethan said, raising his weapon. "Take it down." The battle that followed was fierce and chaotic. The constructs attacked relentlessly, forcing the team to fight for every inch of ground. Ethan focused on protecting Mia as she worked to disable the core, knowing their success depended on her. "It's resisting," Mia shouted, frantically adjusting the frequency on her device. "I need more time." "You've got it," Clara yelled, firing steadily to hold off the advancing machines. With a final burst of effort, Mia triggered the device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, growing louder until it became almost unbearable. Then, with a deafening crack, the core shattered, sending shockwaves through the facility. The biomechanical constructs froze in place, their glowing eyes dimming as their systems collapsed. For a moment, silence fell over the chamber. Then cheers erupted as the team realized they had done it. They had destroyed the Curators' central core. Returning to the library was bittersweet. Though victorious, the cost of their success was painfully clear. Many fighters hadn't returned, their names added to the growing list of those who had given everything for the cause. Ethan stood before the survivors, his voice heavy with emotion. "We did it," he said, addressing the crowd. "Together we took back what was stolen from us. But let's not forget the price we paid. Let's honor their memory by building something worth fighting for." Cheers echoed through the library, but beneath the celebration lay a sense of renewal. Survivors began returning to reclaimed territories, planting seeds both literal and metaphorical for a better future. Homes were rebuilt, fields were tilled, and laughter returned to places long abandoned. Ethan watched it all unfold, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The scars left by the Curators ran deep, but he also believed in humanity's resilience. As long as people came together, they could overcome anything. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan climbed onto the roof of the library. Clara joined him, sitting quietly beside him as they gazed at the stars. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "We rebuild, we heal, and we keep moving forward." Clara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Sounds like a plan." Together they sat in silence, watching as the first lights of a new dawn appeared on the horizon. It was a small beginning, fragile and uncertain, but it was theirs. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt hopeful. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because that was what it meant to rise, govern, and reclaim.